red. There you
like
go.
that.
It's on. So, good evening, candidates, and hello to everyone in our in-person and viewing audience. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for Assembly District 45 in advance of the November 8th general election. Assembly District 45 includes communities within the greater Beloit service areas so tonight's forum is co-sponsored by Beloit League of Women's Voters of Beloit and the NAACP Beloit chapter with the support of the Wisconsin State League. I am George Williams, a professor at the Beloit College and a member of the NAACP Beloit chapter and moderator for tonight's forum. In service to the League's mission to encourage informed participation in government, the League sponsors candidate forums, a public venue for candidates to express their views and positions on issues that matter to you, the voter. The League and the NAACP are nonpartisan political organizations that neither support or oppose political parties or candidates. This forum is being live streamed as well as recorded by the School District of Beloit. You will be able to find it on the school district's YouTube recordings. There are two candidates running for the open seat in Assembly District 45. They are Jeff Klett, Republican, and Clinton Anderson, the Democrat candidate. To the candidates, we'd like to thank you for being civically engaged and for your willingness to be here tonight to share your views so voters can make an informed decision on Election Day. Please join me in welcoming both candidates. After this applause, we ask that in-person audience remain quiet. Turn off your cell phones, please, and wait to give final applause at the end of the forum. The questions I will be asking the candidates tonight are a combination of those submitted online in advance of the forum by the League's notice in public press releases and on social media. Questions submitted from our in-person audience members and one question each from Beloit League and the NAACP. Candidate question cards and pencils are found on all the seats. Please raise your hand to have your card picked up, or if you need additional cards. You can submit questions in this manner throughout the forum. Candidate questions received in advance of tonight's forum were previewed by League members who sorted them by topic, checked them for redundancy, and made sure they were relevant to both candidates, as the League does not accept questions targeted to a specific candidate. Questions received from the audience tonight will go through the same process at the table to my side. The organized members, one from each group, serve as question checkers. We will turn to additional questions prepared by the League and NAACP only if questions from the voters fail to fill the forum's 1.5-hour time frame. The League will do its best to be sure information in question is accurate and truthful. That is our responsibility. It is not our responsibility to police the content of the candidates' questions or call them out for misinformation. We bring their views to the voters in this venue unfiltered, so you, the voter, can align your value with those of the candidates who you feel best reflects your views. Candidates, you will each have 3 minutes for your opening statement. We will start with Mr. Anderson and then proceed to Mr. Klett. Speaking order was determined by a drawing with the candidates prior to the start of the forum. When you reach 30 seconds remaining in your time, our timer, seated in the front row, will raise a 30-second card. When your time is up, they will raise a stop sign. This is our means of keeping you within your response time limits. If, when your time is up, you are caught mid-sentence, you may complete your thought, but in the interest of time, we will move on. Do you have any questions about opening remarks? If not, let's begin. As we said, we'll begin with
What if I have a really long sentence?
Don't worry. When we come to that bridge, we'll cross it, all right?
Okay, just
All
checking.
right, okay. So, as we said, the prior drawing, Mr. Anderson will start first, and Mr. Klett will go second.
Thank you, everybody. First, I want to thank George for moderating, Jeff for being here, the League of Women Voters, and the NAACP. My name is Clinton Anderson, and I'm running to replace Mark Spreitzer in the 45th. Just a little bit about my background. I've been a lifelong Beloit resident and went through the public school system here in Beloit, graduated from Beloit Memorial in 2011, which, according to the kids I work with, was a long time ago. When I finished, I went to UW-Rock County to get my associate's degree and then received my degree in psychology from UW-Whitewater. When I graduated, I went to work at the YWCA of Rock County, where I served as a volunteer coordinator and a shelter advocate in the Alternatives to Violence program, providing direct client services to survivors of domestic violence. Currently, I work at Professional Services Group. We're based out of Janesville, but we service Rock, Walworth, and Jefferson County. My job is skill development, so what I do is I work with kids that have a variety of special needs, and we help them address a set of goals. Some of those could be daily living skills, emotional regulation, or appropriate boundaries. On the electoral side, I've been on the Beloit City Council for 5 years, and have been very proud to serve with some amazing people, and have had the opportunity to be both vice president and president of that council. And honestly, both those things, my electoral history and my work history, are why I'm running. I love helping people, whether it's answering a question at the farmer's market, which is inevitable when you're out there in the community, or helping a survivor find housing, or helping a kid learn a new skill. I want to bring my skills and my unique background up to Madison and serve them and all of you. And once again, I just really appreciate all of you being here, and thank you to Jeff, and I hope everyone can get a good feel for what they believe in and who they want to vote for on November 8th. Thank you.
I didn't know if you're going to give me the nod or whatever. So, I am Jeff Klett, born and raised right here in Beloit, Wisconsin. It's a community that I love very much. I love this state. It's been very good to the Klett family, and there's a lot of us. There's 10 kids in our family. I'm the oldest of 9 boys and 1 girl. My mom, who's in the very back row, Joanne, is here, and my father is Fred Klett. You may have seen the paper tonight. They're being inducted into the Hall of Fame, Historic Hall of Fame, for their lifetime community give back. So my parents raised us to be community involved. And when I came back to Beloit in '98, I got involved in the Greater Beloit Chamber. I got involved, as you know, I was elected to the school board in 2005 to 2008, serving as a president in 2008. I served on I was a chair for the Greater Beloit Economic Development Corporation, which is a partnership between the city of Beloit and the business community to bring jobs to this community and keep jobs in this community. My wife and I were the co-presidents of the Beloit Aquatic Swim Team, BATS. I was president of the Wisconsin Association of Health Underwriters. I was vice president of the Beloit Snappers, which is now the Sky Carp. We finally got that stadium we had worked so hard for so many years. I share that with you for this reason. What's lacking in Madison and in D.C. is this ability to work with each other. And when you work on community committees, you work with people that are Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians. We learn to work together for a common cause to find solutions, and that's lacking. I don't look at Clinton as a Democrat as my enemy. He just has different ideas, and I think we've lost that civility in politics. So hopefully, as we move forward, we can find that we can come together to find solutions. You know, the motto in Wisconsin is forward. My dad would always add the word always. Always forward. We can't change what's happened behind us, you know, the COVID thing and all that. We can only move forward. So what I really want to do is go to Madison, take my skill set, make a better life community for not only for us, but really it's for our children and our grandchildren. I meant to say, by the way, I do have 3 wonderful grandchildren. My favorite word in the world is Papa. So having said that, I'm done.
Thank you for your opening statements. You will each have 2 minutes for your responses to questions. The first question will be answered by Mr. Klett. Then the second question will move to Mr. Anderson. Then the second question, the question after that, will be answered by Mr. Anderson. Then we'll move on to Mr. Klett. Speaking order will rotate in this manner until closing statements when the order will be reversed. Again, speaking order was determined by a drawing with the candidates prior to the start of the forum, and our timer is here with the 30-second and stop cards to keep you within your 2-minute response limit. Are there any questions before we begin? Okay, all right. So, if I remember correctly, that Mr. Anderson will start, right? Or did I mess that up already? All right, okay, all right, Mr. Klatt. All right, you guys are gonna keep me on my toes. All right, so Mr. Klatt, first question. What do you think the most pressing issues facing this district are? Share your plans to address them.
Education. We are failing in this state, our children. Beloit is rated the worst state in this at 420. For the first time in Wisconsin, proficient achievement is less than 40%. In Beloit, it's 10% approximately. I'm a huge believer in school choice, that parents should be able to send their children to the school of their choice that best serves their needs. I think that DPI has let us down. It's one thing to put a report card out, but how are you helping schools that are failing get on track? We don't talk about achievement at the state level. If you listen to the politics, it's about social issues, but it's not about the reading, writing, and math. And to be successful in life, if you can't do those things, you're not going to be successful. And so I was fortunate. I'm a graduate of Beloit High School, as are my 8 brothers and sister and my 3 children. We learned the basics in Converse School. I did in Converse, my other brother's Morgan School, but I think we've lost sight of the basics in education. And I think we need to work with DPI as to what are you doing to help schools get better. I know that under the regulations that I've read, DPI is supposed to come in for schools that are failing for more than 5 years, at lowest 5%, and help their school board administration and principals and curriculum and get them on track. That hasn't happened. So the state has let us down on the public education front. And for me, I think that as a taxpayer, a parent has a right to put their child in a different school, and whether it be a private school or a charter school, which, by the way, charter schools are public schools, so that their child can get the best education possible.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. I think one of the most pressing issues is infrastructure. That is something that we're seeing a lot of conversations around in the city of Beloit, but also in our rural townships, we're hearing this as well. I had the opportunity to sit with the Greene County Towns Association a couple of months ago, and infrastructure is the top of their mind. The challenges for them is that they can't meet a lot of the matches for a lot of these grants that they could receive. I think the state could be a partner and help them address that. Cutting red tape is another thing I heard from them too. They feel like there's a lot of little things that are tough for a small township to address. So I want to go in there and actually cut the red tape for them too and make it easier for them. I think the state can really do a lot more to help rural roads get built and reconstructed. Bridges are falling apart out there, and in the city of Beloit, we thankfully have a lot of ARPA funds that we're using to address the lead laterals, but without more funding, it's going to take a long time to actually get that completed. I asked our public works director, without ARPA funding, how long was it going to take us to remove every lead lateral in the city of Beloit, and he said 100 years. The city cannot do this alone. We need the state to be a partner with local governments to address the infrastructure needs in all of our communities.
Okay, on to the second question. Wisconsin spent $12,740 per student on public elementary and secondary education in 2020. According to the latest data released by the U.S. Census Bureau, that's almost 6% below the national average and ranks 25th in the nation for 2020. The cities suffering the most are the ones that have lower property levels, so therefore less money from the state, and that includes Beloit. What actions will you take to increase support for public education? Mr. Anderson, you'll be first.
First off, I think the big thing is we need to fulfill the promise that the state gave a long time ago to address the amount of special education funding. We are not putting enough in there. I work almost exclusively with special education students, and I can tell you that it takes a lot of resources to help address their unique needs, and the state promised 2/3 and they're not giving it. So I really think that's where we need to start. I believe our kids are our future, and I don't think there's any amount of money that is too much to support our children. So not only should we be doing that, we need to just make sure we're actually investing as much as we can in that. So we have a state surplus of over $5 billion. I think we can do a lot there to help address some of those cost gaps too, because we have school districts going and governing by referendum, making sure that they don't do that. Like I said, kids are our future. I think we need to be doing a lot more. The state had a promise, and it's about time we fulfill that.
Mr. Klett.
Repeat the question, will you please?
Wisconsin spent $12,740 per student on public elementary and secondary education in 2020. According to the latest data released by the U.S. Census Bureau, that's almost 6% below the national average and ranks 25th in the nation for 2020. The cities suffering the most are the ones that have lower property levels, so therefore less money from the state, and that includes Beloit. What actions would you take to increase support for public education?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at play there. So Beloit does very well with the way they do revenue sharing in Wisconsin. We talk about money, input, but we don't talk about output. And so when you look at schools around us, like the charter school up on the hill that does it for less money, and you saw the results that they've got, they show drastic improvement. So money isn't really the issue to me. We have plenty of money in this system. We are at 2/3 share revenue through the budget. I do think we do need to put more money into counseling and mental health, especially in the K through 3. But I really think the focus really, when you look at, and I'm going to ramble a bit, but I saw a study the other day where 4 of the largest school districts in the nation spent significant dollars and achievement went down. So we always want to equate money with achievement. It's not happening that way. We really need to focus on what's the output going to be for the dollars that we're spending, and how do we get to that point? And we're seeing around the state where charter schools and private schools, which get significantly less money, almost half, are having success with their students with reading, writing, and math, college ready, world ready. And by the way, those schools also, when they follow the Milwaukee school system, for example, less crime, less paternity suits for people that went to the charter schools and the private schools that are doing it with less money.
All right. The labor force has always been a key factor in Wisconsin's economy, and it is highlighted by a new initiative to recruit more workers. Our labor force has declined in part to the rate of individuals leaving the state. Outmigration has exceeded those moving in almost every year since 2010. What do you think are the reasons for this? What suggestion can you offer to reverse this trend? And do you think that the outmigration is impacted by Wisconsin's continuing to rank in its lowest percentile in the nations related to the racial disparities in income and employment? Mr. Klett, you'll go first.
That's a tough question. Really, I think for us, looking at tax policy, regulations, licensing are some of the reasons that people leave the state. We also know that we compete with other states that have better weather than we do. But if you look at the tax policies, the regulations that are here, I think we can do better, which would actually then keep people in our state. So I don't have the magic to solve that issue. And I think that's something that we probably should discuss at a legislative effort. But everything I've always, I'm going to repeat myself, is that tax policy, regulations, we need to do a better job when we graduate kids from universities, from the tech colleges, as to how are we going to keep these kids here? Are we offering the right wage package, which I think we are for most people? So the key is when we educate kids, what do we do to keep them in our community? What services can we offer? Where are we lacking? What do we need to do better?
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. I think there's 2 things that we need to be doing to keep people here. One is raise the wage. Our minimum wage has not changed since 2009. We need to raise that wage to a $15 minimum wage to bring people back here. I'll just share one thing. I had a class reunion not too long ago, and a lot of those people I talked to left the state because they said they don't make enough money here. So raising the wages will get these people back. Another thing is, if we want more people to participate in the workforce, we need to get them childcare. My cousin, she's a social worker out of Milwaukee, and she would lose money if she put her kid in daycare. So that's unacceptable. So we need to make sure that accessible childcare is available too. So as I said, the two things I would push for is increased minimum wage and increased accessibility to childcare.
Okay, the next set of questions are coming from the community. What would you do the first 90 days in office, Mr. Anderson?
That's a good question. Whoever asked it, good one. I think the first thing I do in the first 90 days is, other than figure out how to get through the Capitol, would be to get to meet my Republican colleagues. I firmly believe that building relationships and getting to know people as people instead of by party is going to be a way to get things done. The Democratic legislators I know that have had success have built positive relationships with their Republican colleagues. I know what it's going to look like up there in Madison. It's going to be tough for a Democrat, but I believe building a positive relationship with people and getting to know them is how you get things done. We've been able to do that in the city council. We don't always have a disagreement, but when we do, we're able to move on like adults. And I want to be able to get to know my colleagues and actually build a relationship so we can do what's best for the 45th Assembly District.
Mr. Collette?
Well, really, it is all about relationship development. I go back to my opening statements where when you work with people, you get to know them, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Independent. Also, the governor comes into play as to how are we going to find ways to work together and build that relationship that we need. I think it's important to develop those people skills with the people you're going to be working with. Let them know that you're open to different ideas, and also be willing to challenge people to think differently. I think sometimes in government, people that have been there for a long time get stagnant in the way they think. And I think when you get a chance to sit down with people and talk to them about, why do you think this way? Why do you think that way? You know, in my community, we think this way, and we are here to make a change. And how do we build that relationship to make that change?
What community-minded projects have you previously worked on that you were most proud of? Mr. Collette, you'll go first.
Well, there's more than one, but recently I was able to help raise $5.5 million for the State Line Boys and Girls Club through the COVID, that beautiful building next door, which serves the youth of this community. That was a tough pull, but I'll tell you, what was rewarding about that was, again, talking to people in this community willing to give money during difficult times for the future of our city. So that was one of the nicest things for me. Another one was when I was on the school board when the COVID was, no one really knew what COVID was. And, there's a lot of panic in there. The schools were closed, and the hospitals were worried about being overrun. They wouldn't have anywhere to go. So I was approached by the city manager at the time and Tim McKev from the hospital about, could we use Aldridge as an emergency room facility? And originally got pushback from board members and administrators that, we're afraid of what will happen if we have COVID in that building. But it's a public building and it's for the good of the public. And so we were able to work through that issue. And it wasn't easy, by the way, with both the hospital and the city and the school district as to who's going to do what. But we came to a conclusion, and we were able to make that an emergency facility in case COVID got out of hand. And I'm very proud of that because it was an uphill battle, but it was the right thing to do.
Mr. Anderson.
Another great question. This is great so far. I think some of the stuff is public-private partnerships that I've had on the city council. One is giving the land to the Boys and Girls Club for them to build their facility. The other one was also making a land that was an environmental disaster become a beautiful ballpark. The city gave that land to help them develop that. So those are two things I really am proud of on my time in the city council. One outside of government is actually a building across the street too, the Beloit Meals on Wheels building. I serve on the board for that organization and very proud of that too. And it's been a great project. It's been a long time coming, but it was really amazing to see the groundbreaking, which was, I believe, in April. It feels like a long time ago, but it's going to be open soon, and I'm very excited for that too.
So the next group of questions are related to the election process. Do you think that one person, the Secretary of State, should have sole jurisdiction of running the elections in Wisconsin, or continue with the current election board? Mr. Anderson.
I think this is going to depend on what party wins the election. You're going to see some people change their tune. I firmly believe that if the Democrat Doug LaFollette wins, the Republicans are going to scrap their idea of giving more power to the Secretary of State. So I think right now, keep it the way it is. This is something that changed several years ago. Unfortunately, partisan politics have gotten in the way of that. We should not be playing politics with the electoral process. And right now, the way it's working is absolutely fine. You have to have some compromise, right? As the way the system currently stands, we should not put that much power into one person's hands. We've seen the divisiveness over the last couple of years. This is not the right move. And like I said, if the Democrat wins, I bet you the Republicans scrap this idea almost immediately.
Mr. Klett.
Don't quite know about that, but to me, we've been fine with the way the election process has worked. I've heard the people running for office that they want to move that relationship into the office, and I really think it's something the legislature needs to sit down and discuss. Whoever wins this election, and it comes to the Capitol, as to what's really in the best interest of the communities out there, and I really think the people need to let legislators know, whether it's Democrat or Republican, as to how do you want your election process to work. Do you want to just have one person overseeing it? Do you like the way the committees sit? Because really, it comes down to what do the people want, not what do Republicans want or what do Democrats want to happen. Is it going to be this way this year, and an election changes, are we going to change it the next time? So I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. I don't think the current system's broken, quite frankly, but I'm always open to having a discussion.
If elected, will you follow party lines 100%, Mr. Klett?
Anybody that knows me knows the answer to that is no. I will tell you that, just like the last question, the answer would have been, yeah, let's do that. But I'm disappointed in that we don't have independent redistricting, quite frankly, that people, I've been doing doors, aren't understanding what district they're actually in because it changes from time to time. I'm a big believer in open primaries where you can vote for the person and not the party. And when I've gone door to door, people are telling me that. We don't want to be told we have to vote for a party in the primary when we want to vote for a person. I'm running as a Republican. I have voted for Democrats in my lifetime because I like what that person stands for. And so why do we not let people vote for who they want for? And so, yeah, I'm not afraid to say to the party that, no, I'm not going down that path because I don't think it's the right thing for the people I represent.
Mr. Anderson.
Also, no. There are a couple things that I probably would buck the line a little bit on the party. One, from talking to some business leaders, is I would fight to remove the personal property tax. A lot of businesses have told me that that's nickel and diming them, and from hearing them, who are the experts, I would tend to agree. So I would like us to go actually and remove that, and I know that's not a very popular position with most of the Democrats, and I'm willing to stand by it. And also, ultimately, we serve the 45th. We don't serve a party. So I'm willing to do what the people want. So that's the route I'll go. Is I'm here for the people, and yeah, we have a party label. I'm running as a Democrat, but that doesn't mean I'm only a Democrat.
Do you support the results of the 2020 presidential election in Wisconsin that Biden won the election? Mr. Anderson.
Yes. That's all I have to say. Yes.
All right. Mr. Klett.
You know, I have to trust that the election, and I've got friends that say no, but I've said we move on. The election results are what they are. President Biden won, and it's time to, like I said in my opening statement, we need to move forward and not backwards. So I'm fine with where we're at.
So our last question related to the election process. To protect election integrity, would you support a defined number of ballots be printed per ward? This allows a count of unused ballots immediately following the election.
Me.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's Mr. Klett. Sorry.
Yeah, I have not heard that before. So I'm for anything that keeps the integrity in the election process. I tend to be a person that believes that people do the right things for the right reasons. There have been questions in the past as to, was the last election, there were some discrepancies, but overall, I have to believe that the process works. So if that's a process that people believe will help and make things more I guess, I don't know what the word for that would be, acceptable. I'm fine with that. But I truly trust the process that we've had in place for all these years. Yes, there's been some issues that have popped up that I think do cause some concerns, but I think they're being addressed. And as we move forward, the elections will be fair.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I've never heard that specific question framed that way, but I would just say let's trust the clerks. They're the experts. They're the ones that know how the electoral process works. They know about the number of ballots that we need. So I would defer to the clerks. They're the experts, and we're just elected officials. So I want to make sure that they're doing what's best.
Okay, so our questions are going to shift to healthcare. Please explain specifically how you would vote regarding a woman's presumed right to reproductive health and abortion. Do you support the total abortion ban in Wisconsin? Mr. Anderson, you'll go first.
No, I don't support the ban that's currently in place. Also, shame on our legislators for gaveling in and gaveling out 2 sessions on a woman's right to choose. One on whether or not to overturn the 1849 law, another one to have us have a question on the ballot whether or not to allow people to vote on that choice. I think a woman's health, this is a woman's health care decision. I'm going to keep it like, if somebody wants to have an abortion, that is their call. I think it's ironic that we have 2 men having a conversation over a woman's right to choose. So I will leave it up to a woman to make the best decision between them and their doctor.
Mr. Klett.
Probably the most contentious issue that we have, which we'll probably be talking about year in, year out. No, I don't agree with the current law the way it stands. I'm a person that believes in exceptions, where it be rape, incest, or for the women's health. I have a different perspective as to, and I think it's important for people to know why I think the way I think. It doesn't make me right, but it tells you why I think. My wife and I lost our oldest daughter stillborn at birth, and when you hold a dead child in your hands, your understanding what life is or isn't changes in that moment. So that was a difficult time, and my wife, because of that, was put under. We had tests done for the next 3 kids that we had, and the youngest child came back. We were going on vacation, and the doctor came in and said, "Well, we think your child might be autistic, and you might, if you want to consider an abortion, you need to do it soon." And so we left that place and said, "No, we're not. We're going to have this child." The doctor didn't tell us to have an abortion. He just said, if you want to consider, if you don't want to have to take care of a kid that's autistic. I didn't know what autistic even meant, and he said it was mental issues. We did get the baby retested, but we were not going to abort that child. If we would have jumped off that bridge and had that abortion because of that discussion, we wouldn't have our youngest daughter and our 2 granddaughters. So, yeah, I have a strong feeling about abortion. I also know that we had a very close family member that was brutally raped, and the judge in the paper said it was the worst case he ever had presided over. We didn't know at the time who it was. We found out later. But when I saw that person shortly after that, the eyes were dead. There was no personality. And I'm thinking, you're trading off one life for another. To make her have that child and live that every day, to me, would be an injustice. It would be her decision if she wanted to have the baby, but it should not be forced to have that baby.
If elected, how would you deal with the healthcare issues here in Wisconsin? Specifically, how would you address the high cost of and lack of transparency in the price of healthcare and prescriptions in Wisconsin? Mr. Klett?
Well, transparency is becoming part of healthcare. I know Beloit Health System is one of the most transparent in the state. I've met with the Hospital Association on that. I do think we have a prescription drug issue. There are a lot of middle people collecting a lot of money and controlling the cost of prescriptions. And I think that has to be looked at, both at a state level and a national level. I think the other thing that needs to be done is we need to reward health systems that take care of the poor. Those people on Medicaid and to some extent Medicare, the hospitals are reimbursed less money for taking care of those that need it the most, and yet at the same time, those that don't take care of the Medicare patients make a lot more money. And so for our community like Beloit, it's important for us to have a health system that's viable, and I think we need to make sure we find ways that they're compensated fairly.
Mr. Anderson.
We should have hospitals disclose what their prices are. I think it's unfair that you don't know what you're going to get billed till you get the bill. I've had to deal with that, and a lot of other people have too. Going off of that, we need to expand Medicaid. Right now, we're keeping 91,000 people off of Badger Care right now, and that's unacceptable. And these aren't people that are unemployed. These are people that might be underemployed or maybe don't have an employer-provided health insurance. I think it's an injustice that we're playing politics with healthcare, and I want us to make sure that we're putting politics aside and getting as many people covered as possible in this state.
Would you accept federal funding monies for health care? Why or why not, Mr. Anderson?
Kind of just said that, but yes, I would. I absolutely accept those federal funds. Like I said, don't want to play politics with healthcare. I think it's the right decision. Increases the income level for people to qualify for Badger Care. I would like us to end up shifting to a public option in the long term, but I think in the short term, we need to be accepting the federal dollars that are available to us.
Mr. Klett?
I'm assuming you're referring to the federal money for the Medicaid program?
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Well, I didn't hear that. I mean, I want to know if you're talking specifically about federal money for a Medicaid program, because that's the only program I'm aware that it's...
Okay, well, I'll just repeat the question.
Okay.
Would you accept federal funding monies for health care? Why or why not?
Depends on where it's going. If it's going for the Medicaid, which Clint was referring to, the answer is no. There's two problems with it. It's a one-time, who's going to fund it in the future? But more importantly, when you look at the Affordable Care Act, the purpose of it was to get people on commercial insurance. Commercial insurance reimburses health systems at a higher rate. So, for example, in Beloit here, if you were to go as Medicaid, Beloit Health System gets less money than if you're on a commercial. On the Affordable Care Act, people that can't afford the premiums get subsidies to make those premium payments. A lot of them don't pay anything for it. So, for example, if you had a knee replacement at the health system, it's $13,000 just for the equipment. Medicaid pays $9,000. They're already losing money before they even started the operation. However, you could go down the street to the commercial person doing it that doesn't take Medicaid patients, and they're going to get rewarded for that. So if we do the Medicaid, put more people on Medicaid, that means systems like the health system that has 72% of their population is Medicaid, Medicare. You're going to pay them less money, and you're going to expect them to be profitable or to be in this community. I mean, be careful what you ask for, because if you drive the health system out of business because we're going to cost shift, which favors those that only treat those that have money, what are you going to do with a kid at 2 o'clock in the morning that needs to go to the emergency room and it's no longer there? So be careful of take the money because it sounds good, but there's a pitfall to that.
Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to remind the audience to place your questions on the index cards for us to pick up. Thank you. What are your thoughts about the legislation decriminalization of marijuana in Wisconsin? Would you support legislation, Mr. Klett?
No. I would support medical marijuana. I've seen my father, my grandfather, my father-in-law all have horrible ends to their life. If it could help them ease them through that transition, yes. I have concerns with THC and the effects. We're seeing studies come out now that those that use these higher level THCs with pregnancies, that there's problems with a child. We're seeing that the youth that start at a young age hear voices. We don't know the long-term effects of THC. I mean, I met with a youth-to-youth group that's anti-tobacco, and we talked about that. I mean, how do you tell kids, we don't want you to smoke, but we're going to legalize marijuana? And by the way, the vape pipe's a big part of marijuana. So, yeah, are we talking about the future of our kids and their health, or are we talking about revenue to the state? Because that's really what this seems to come down to when I hear the discussion from legislators is, hey, we're losing all this tax revenue. But there's also states that have had this where you've seen crime go up, you've seen school achievement go down, you've seen more accidents. Are those good things? So, yeah, it sounds, it's a misdemeanor to have marijuana, but there are pitfalls to legalizing recreational marijuana with the high THC that there is today.
Mr. Anderson.
I'm in favor of full legalization, and I'll tell you why. One, we do have revenue going out of the state. If you go to Sunnyside Dispensary, which is in South Beloit, just take a look at all the license plates. I bet you at least half of them are from Wisconsin, and I am being very generous there. Another thing is, if we're concerned about THC levels in marijuana, they're regulated. I'd rather have it be regulated. If somebody's going to go out and do it, let's make sure it's regulated and safe. Those places that are dispensaries are held accountable. So I want to make sure that they are they're being held in check instead of somebody going to buy it on the streets. Another thing is we're clogging up the prison system with a lot of people that are getting slapped with fines and getting sent to jail for small amounts of marijuana. I'm not only in favor of the legalization, I want to expunge people's records that previously had a marijuana offense, because we've seen a lot of states that have had it. They've fixed all the issues with it, and I think we're in a good spot now where we know what's going to happen. So a lot of other states have it legalized. I think we should too.
Okay, so we're going to shift our attention to the environment. Water quality and safety is a growing public health concern, with nitrate pollution being very high across southern Wisconsin. How will you approach the health and pollution issues surrounding field and lawn runoff to ensure every family with a well in your district has safe drinking water? Mr. Anderson.
I think we were both waiting to see which one of us it was there.
You got this one.
With water quality, it's really important, and I think it's unique with our district. We have a lot of people that have city water like they do in Beloit, and we have a lot of people that have well water out in the rural communities, and the folks in rural communities will attest that the well water is better than anything we can get here. We need to make sure it's safe. And a lot of our ag community and farmers are taking it upon themselves. They have watershed groups that are making sure that the water level is safe and drinkable. And I really applaud our farmers that are taking initiative to do it. On the city side, I mentioned earlier, the lead laterals. We are replacing them, and I think it's great that we keep investing in that to make sure that there are no lead pipes in any place in this state. We also received a grant for $600,000 from the state to replace it on the resident side. I think we need to continue to do that and make sure we're investing in as much clean water as possible. We've seen what's happened in Flint, Michigan and Jackson, Mississippi. Those become an issue, and it's really tough to get back to it once it become a problem. So I think it's better we be proactive instead of reactive. So anything we can do to invest in good, clean drinking water, I'm all for.
Mr. Klett.
I know that with the cities like Beloit, Janesville, that the infiltration systems do keep the water at acceptable levels. There are issues with nitrate, especially in the wells. I know a lot of people at the wells voluntarily put on their faucets, the filters that make it drinkable. That doesn't solve the problem. I know there are farmers that do track the nitrates in the ground. I really think that one of the things we should be doing is talking to the University of Wisconsin, which we have one of the top agriculture universities in the world, that we should be talking about how do we stop the runoff that we have, because there is a fine balance that the farmers do need to treat their crops for the food that we eat, and at the same time we have to be careful as to the nitrates, how best to address that. And I think we have some wonderful resources in Madison to use it, and it really seems to come down to what the well issue is. And like I say, there's some voluntary things that you can do, but it doesn't fix the problem permanently. But I do think that we just have to keep talking about that with people that have better ideas than we do.
Climate change is resulting in more frequent extreme weather events, such as flash flooding, droughts, and high winds. These impacts of climate change strain local infrastructure, crops, and human health. How will you help promote climate resilience throughout Wisconsin and in communities across your district? Mr. Klett, you're first.
Well, I think it goes back to, again, that you need to talk to the experts. We've got a wonderful university system as to what are the things that we can do. We are one of the worst states with clean energy. We are lagging behind in wind and power, wind and solar. Not that they're the end-all, but we probably need to start looking at more things in the green energy field that help as we move down this road. You've seen the investment that car companies are making into the electric cars. They're not making those investments because they don't think it's going to be the way of the future. So I think Wisconsin does need to step up its green energy policies as we move forward. And I think at the same time, we've got this wonderful university system that could be a huge asset as we look at how are the best ways to handle the climate.
Mr. Anderson.
I think shifting to 100% renewables is the way to fix this. It's becoming really bleak. It's becoming a challenge to address the climate issues. I think every couple of weeks we see that the experts are saying we hit another threshold of it being almost too late for us to fix this crisis. But I think the best we can do right now is to continue to invest in solar energy. I toured the Alliant Energy solar farm that is in process out there just outside the city of Beloit, and just seeing them take initiative is great, but we all need to do something. So I think the state can invest in making sure that there are more electric charging ports for vehicles. I know that they're trying to do that up by Lake Michigan as you're driving up there. They want to do it in conjunction with other states there. But I think we can invest in more charging ports and make sure that people actually can get electric vehicles and find a place to charge them. I bought a vehicle last year, and I wanted to look at electric, but I wasn't quite sure where to charge it, and I got a little overwhelmed, so I went back to a gas-powered vehicle. So the more we can make it accessible and easy for people to use, the better. So I'm all in for us to go 100% renewable as soon as possible.
Please reflect on Governor's task force on climate change and share how you would approach the recommendations that came from the final report. Mr. Anderson, you're first.
I'll keep it short. I trust them. They're experts. They know what they're doing. We need to have climate action. We need to have it fast. So I will follow their recommendations.
Mr. Klatt?
Since I've not seen the report, I really don't know how I'm going to answer that question. So I go back to the climate change question before, as we need to look at renewable energies as we move forward, and how do we make that more affordable. But I have not seen that report, so I really don't know how I could comment on it.
All right. What plans do you have to make sure that every one of our diverse populations in this district have equal access to employment, housing, clean water, and safe neighborhoods? Mr. Klatt, you're first.
Well, I truly believe that in Beloit we do have the opportunity for everybody to have the life they want. What I do think in this community that we are lacking is affordable housing, which does affect, quite frankly, a lot of the African American and Hispanic community. We really need, when you look at statistics with the housing part of it, rents are too high, especially for some of the wages that are being paid. I've talked with the people at Family Promises on, they take people in and they tell me that when they're ready to leave, they have jobs, but they can't afford the housing or the rent. And so there are programs that are out there, and I really think that we should be using some of the surplus money that we have, the $5.1 billion, to bring it back to this community like Beloit that has issues with housing that really affects, quite frankly, different segments of the population more than others. And so those are things that we can do to make sure that we are treating everybody equally.
Mr. Anderson.
It was a long question. Could you repeat it?
The question was, what plans do you have to make sure that every one of our diverse populations in this district has equal access to employment, housing, clean water, and safe neighborhoods?
Yes. So when it comes to employment, it's partnering with various schools here and making sure that people do have access to the education needed to get some of the high-paying jobs. I think this is a good opportunity for some of our labor unions to partner with it. I know that there's organizations that try to find women and people of color to join labor unions. I think that's a good route to go. As far as the clean drinking water, I think it is prioritizing the lateral removals in those neighborhoods that might really desperately need it. When we're talking about environmental justice, it's making sure that we don't leave people behind. I don't want us to move to clean energy but leave certain neighborhoods with gas-powered stoves still. So it's making sure we prioritize and be very intentional with the way we're removing dirty energy and moving to clean energy. We can right a lot of the wrongs if we do this right.
Okay. With the divisions of the greater Beloit area in different assembly districts, what will you do to promote a cohesive voice for the people of this area? Mr. Anderson.
Well, first off, it would be great if we did have us in one assembly district and one assembly district, but for the time being, I would get to know the other representative that will represent Beloit and the other senator that will represent Beloit. I also will get to know whoever is representing the 15th district after this election, building a partnership with them. I fully intend on getting to know my eventual colleague in the 31st Assembly District and trying to see what we can do for Beloit. Because while that person may end up being from a different party, I think we can say, well, let's see what we can do to help make this community a better place. Not everything has to be a red or blue issue. I think we can find some common ground, and I'm looking to advocate with whoever is on the other district there to make this a better place to live.
Mr. Klatt.
Well, the key really moving forward is Beloit should be one district, and we are divided, and it's divided for political reasons, and we need to take the politics out of redistrict and districting and the way we do things today. So I would be pushing to have Beloit become more of its own, where we have the township involved in some of the little areas outside of us versus spread out the way we are. And yes, we do need to be able to work with the different representatives, but the difficult part is that, Beloit, we're in with Monticello. We don't have a lot in common, so we do have to reach out and build those relationships with other communities, whether it be Clinton or myself, as to how do we work together to represent everybody. But ultimately, the goal for me, if I'm elected, is Beloit really needs to become a district that's self-encompassing of everybody in Beloit, not just some people in Beloit, because our issues are really connected. And right now, we actually have two school districts, Beloit, the traditional Beloit School District, and Turner, but we're not in the same district. It doesn't make any sense to me. So that's where I would be pushing for.
Okay. So this question comes from the audience and is related to education. Do you believe that elementary school children should be exposed to sexual identity propaganda by their adult mentors within the schools without parental consent? Mr. Klett.
No, I don't think we should be indoctrinating children at a young age in those things. I do think the parents have a right to know what's going on in school and have the say over that. So I would not support that.
Mr. Anderson.
I think calling it propaganda is a little bit of a stretch, to be honest. But I would say that there's a lot of age-appropriate curriculum, no matter what the topic is. And I remember going through elementary school, which doesn't feel like a long time ago, but it really was, when we had sex education. We had a permission slip and whether or not you wanted to participate. And as long as that's the case, the parent does have a choice whether or not to engage in that curriculum.
Okay, again, another question from the audience, and this has to do with health care. If marijuana becomes legal, how would you envision situations where children are being subjugated to a living environment of the exposure? How should others that live in apartments where the THC is being smoked function if they can't handle it? What should they do? Mr. Anderson.
Essentially, just the same as it would be with cigarettes. I mean, that's a simple answer. If it's being smoked, I would say the same rule applies for tobacco or THC.
Okay, Mr. Klett.
Well, it's one of the main reasons I'm against legalizing marijuana with the THC, because what does happen at the home, what happens when the child sees the gummy and thinks it's candy, or the gum is candy and it's not. I would think there would be probably charges brought against the person that's smoking the marijuana or whatever they're doing with it, because that is my fear with the THC, is what happens to the children in the households that's taking place.
Okay, as we know, the race for governor is a toss-up. Whether the governor is from your party or from another party, how would you approach rising crime rates and early parole of violent offenders? Mr. Klett.
Well, first of all, we need to make sure our police forces are fully funded. Secondly, we do need to make sure we look at bail reform so that we're not letting people out that are committing horrible crimes. Before the city manager left here, I had a conversation with her about crime in the city, and she said the problem that we have is we keep arresting the same people over and over. And I was down having coffee at the Blue Collar a couple weeks later, and there was two officers there, and I said, "Hey, are you guys arresting the same people over and over?" And they said, "Yeah, we are." That's not backing the blue. When you're making police officers arrest the same people over and over, that's a waste of time. So what are we actually doing? I think that we need to be tougher, especially on the more heinous crimes, and I think we have to be careful with the way we do bail. And take it one step farther, I think we need to make sure that, like we just did recently, release 1,000 prisoners without letting people that were violated know that they were released. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I would be one that says we need to be tough on crime.
Mr. Anderson.
I think, always, I always look at, from my work perspective is let's talk about why they're committing crimes. Is it, they need more money or they're struggling financially or you name it. So I want us to make sure we're trying to tackle the need and trying to be proactive in preventing repeat customers. And I believe the county with their sheriff's department, with their jail upgrades is trying to work on that. I've talked to the sheriff and the sheriff's department lead who is trying to deal with it. They said that they don't want repeat customers, and I think they're making a solid effort to do it. On top of that, too, we need to hire more social workers to help. Our police they have a lot of demands, just like our educators. Our teachers are demanding, are having so many different tasks that they need to address. Our police are doing that, too. They're dealing with welfare calls, and I think it's really important that we hire more social workers to alleviate a lot of that stress on the police department so they're able to do their job. And when it comes to bail reform, I think it's important that we let them actually review if they're going to repeat offend. If they're going to be repeat offenders, let's hold them. But if they're a low risk and they're not going to run away or they're going to actually show up to court, then we can actually have them out. So it's an independent assessment that needs to be done.
Okay. How will you work to ensure this district area receives its fair amount of budget resources? Mr. Anderson.
I think the thing we need to talk about is making sure we don't lose it right now. Every couple sessions, they try to talk about changing the way we do shared revenue, and the city of Beloit does receive a lot of shared revenue from the state. So making sure that we don't lose any of that is really important. And actually, Representative Spreitzer's bill that he put out would actually cap the amount of money. So if you would end up losing money in a changing of the formula, you wouldn't lose any money, but then communities that actually would gain money, and I believe that's a fair assessment. So it's not so much getting their fair share, it's making sure we don't lose any more of it that we already receive right now.
Mr. Collette?
Yeah, I talked with, again, the city manager before she left, and she said, if you get elected, don't let legislators take away the shared revenue that Beloit gets. And because other cities are complaining that Beloit gets too much money. And I would disagree with that. We are a unique city with a lot of diversity and a lot of issues. And so I would say that we need to make sure that we hold on to what we're getting and not take less. And if I'm elected, I'm going to make sure that we don't lose what we get.
How would you make it easier for citizens to vote, Mr. Collette?
I don't know. I think it's pretty easy to vote today. And so I don't know when someone says, how do we make it easier for a person to vote? You can vote absentee. You can, if you're disabled, you can have someone help you get a ballot in. You can do a ballot by mail, or you can show up in person. So I don't know what we would need to do to make it easier. I do foresee, this is just me thinking down the road, that someday we'll do voting electronically, but we're not there yet.
Mr. Anderson.
Thankfully, there are some changes to prevent people with disabilities. There was some to make it harder for them to vote. Things that were as ridiculous as they had to personally deliver something to a mailbox, and thankfully that was overturned. But the repeated attacks on people's rights to vote is alarming. One thing I would really push for is making sure that absentee ballot drop boxes are available, because there are people that work different shifts and want to actually physically drop off their ballot, so I'd allow them to do that. We definitely need to make it easier for people to vote. We're seeing a lot of people not wanting to get involved in the process, and I think it's because of all the barriers and hurdles, not so much here in this community, but in other rural places when your DMV is only open every fourth Wednesday of the month, and that's only a couple times a year. We need to make sure that the DMV is able to give somebody a voter ID when needed.
Since the COVID pandemic, more people are choosing to vote absentee ballots. Should Wisconsin have secure drop boxes for voters to return their absentee ballots? Should clerks be able to count or process the absentee ballots before Election Day? Mr. Anderson.
Yes to both. Going to the second part there, we actually had this conversation in the last city council meeting. We are running short on tabulation machines, and they wanted to close a polling place to make sure they could count them, because we can't actually start counting the ballots until the election day starts. So letting them count it ahead of time would actually be an ease on the clerk staff too, and I think that's what we want to do, is make it easier for them to do their job. It's a tough task. I've seen our clerks in several elections handle it, and it's a tough task for them, and I want to make it as easy as possible for them to do their job, so they should be able to count them as they go.
Mr. Collette.
What was the first part of the question again, with the drop
Since
box?
the COVID pandemic, more people are choosing to vote absentee ballots. Should Wisconsin have secured drop boxes for voters to return their absentee ballots?
Well, and the drop boxes, if it's built at City Hall, I'd have no problem with it, but I don't have any issue with the voting, counting the votes ahead of time, because you're going to count them sooner or later anyway. It might actually make it easier on the process to cross-check people when they're voting, so I would have no problem with that.
How will you ensure shared revenue is distributed to rural areas fairly? And this comes from the community. And Mr. Klett.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure Beloit doesn't lose any of its fair share revenue. I think it's an evaluation process. I don't know what each community gets. I'll be I'm a Beloit guy. We represent different communities, so I don't know what the different shared revenue amounts are or what the needs are for those communities. So it'd be something you'd have to evaluate when you're elected and talking about the budget process, as to saying how much money are we giving and where's it going to and when and how's it being used.
Mr. Anderson.
I'll go back to the previous comment about Representative Spreitger's bill that would prevent us from losing any revenue, but helping other communities gain revenue if it ends up being that way with the new formula. So I think that's the best model we could possibly go with, and I would support that if elected.
Bills concerning elections were introduced into the legislature recently, but provisions perceived to ensure elections are fair, secure, accurate, and transparent to some are perceived as voter suppression and intimidation by others. What comments do you have concerning the accuracy and legitimacy of the 2020 election, and what changes in the electoral process would you support? Mr.
I think we kind of covered it with the last few questions, but yeah, the last election was free and fair, and I believe that we wasted a lot of taxpayer dollars in Michael Gableman's investigation. So I think rehashing the 2020 election is a little ridiculous, and I think it's definitely for partisan gain.
Mr. Klett.
For me, it's just, let's make sure as we move forward that the rules are clear for everybody, that they know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Having been through the election process before in a recount, I found the system to be very fair. There were accusations made in the last election, but overall, I think everything worked out to where it's supposed to be. So I don't have any issues right now with anything with the election process, quite frankly.
Wisconsin is one of the 12 states that have not expanded Medicare. The last rejection of funding the state could have received under the incentive in the American Rescue Plan Act meant Wisconsin turned down $1.6 billion in funding. As a member of the Assembly, would you support the expansion of Medicare? If not, why not? Mr. Klett.
Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicaid. Medicaid.
Okay, which I answered a little bit earlier before. So the problem with taking the money is you're forcing people into Medicaid, which is lower reimbursement to providers like Beloit Health System. And so you're rewarding those that don't serve the Medicaid population. And the money sounds great to take it up front, but what do you do when the funding runs out and the government says, oh, by the way, you're responsible for that funding. Where's that money going to come from? It's going to come from us. At the same time, if you force those poor people on Medicaid that are going to underpay, like Beloit Health System and other systems that treat Medicaid patients, are you driving them out of business? So I would not support taking that money.
Mr. Anderson.
I would take the money. I might same stance about half hour ago. Yeah, absolutely, we should be taking it. And like I said, 91,000 people are not on. It would be added to Badger Care right now if we accepted that money. It's our federal tax dollars. We should get every bit of it back here to the state of Wisconsin.
As a member of the Assembly, how would you support the school district of Beloit, Mr. Anderson?
Increase funding. Kind of said that before too. We need to make sure we have enough funding down here, and I know people are going to go back and say, well, we already have a lot, but we also have a lot of kids with unique needs, so we need to make sure we're fully funding it and helping them address their unique needs. And sometimes that does cost a little bit more money, so we do need more here in the school district to help address those needs.
Mr. Klett.
Well, I don't think money's the answer on that. It really comes down to how does the Department of Public Instruction support a school system like Beloit that's not doing what it should be doing right now. The school district of Beloit ranks 420 in the state. So we do very well financially, but I think DPI has done a poor job of coming in and talking to the Beloit School District. How are you operating? I mean, Beloit is operating the way they did when we had 2,000 more students 10 years ago. We haven't changed the way we operate. But the DPI, the Department of Public Instruction, should be down here helping the school district say, let's help you through these issues to get you back on the right track where achievement goes back and we're doing the right things for our school district.
COWS, Center on Wisconsin Strategy, has stated Wisconsin has the regrettable distinction of ranking among the worst states in the nation for racial inequality. Disparities among black and white residents of our state, spanning poverty, unemployment, educational attainment, and incarceration, have been documented consistently for more than a decade. What do you think are the reasons or sources of these disparities, and how do you think the state legislature should address these disparities? Mr. Klett.
I think it all goes back to education. We are the worst state with the achievement gap with African Americans and the white population. So in our education system, if we're not being honest and fair with the African American population, Hispanic population, how do we expect them to leave here and have the life skills that they need to be successful? I talked to a young man who happened to have a white father and a African American mother, and I asked him, I said, you went through the Beloit school system? And he said, yep. I said, did you see racism in the school system? He said, nope. I said, what did you see? He said, the expectations for me, because I was seen as a African American, were lower than my white counterparts. And I find that to be offensive. And I do too. And so I think our education system has to do a better job of educating people and having expectations that we expect you, when you get down to graduation day, that you've got the skills to be successful in life. And if they graduate with the skills to be successful in life, the rest of the stuff takes care of itself.
Mr. Anderson.
It's definitely a loaded question to undo years of racial segregation and division, but I mean, it really comes down to, I mean, we can go into a history lesson of redlining, but how do we undo it? And there's no simple answer. I think one is we need to work on criminal justice reform and making sure we're being fair and equitable. Same with how we're treating students in school to make sure we're not fueling the school-to-prison pipeline, because that is very much real. Those are two things we can really do to start undoing it. As far as housing, it's just making sure that it's more readily available. Same with wages, making sure the wages are higher too, because you look at the pay gap between people of color and white folks in this community, you're going to see there's going to be a gap, and it's not just because of the career field people pick, it's because of they're getting a pay disparity. So making sure we can eliminate that disparity is another thing we could be doing.
All right. Thank you all for providing us with your views and your positions on the issues brought up today. This is a valuable service to the voters in the November election. You will now each have 2 minutes for closing remarks. For these remarks, the speaker order will be reversed from the opening statements. And if I remember correctly, Mr. Anderson began. So now, for the closing remarks, Mr. Klett, you will be first.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate everybody being here tonight and the opportunity to talk to you. It is challenging when you don't know what you're going to talk about before you come, but hopefully I made some sense. I think my background, this community, being very involved with the different organizations, gives me the skills to represent Beloit. I look at this opportunity to be one that says, how do we build going forward? How do we bring civility back into our legislature? How do we get rid of the finger pointing? I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the negative ads I see in politics that are on TV. It's personal destruction. That's not what we're about. I mean, the one thing about Beloit, it's a proud community. I remember talking to Tommy Johnson years ago, and he was over in Europe, and Beloit came up, and they made a bad comment about Beloit. Oh, that's a really bad place. Beloit's a great place. I mean, the people here are the best in the world. When my wife and I moved here, we lived in Madison and Appleton, and we got here, and she goes, this is the best place we've ever lived. People here are really, we have neighbors that we actually know and talk to. That's what we're about. And that's what really we should be doing in Madison is let's build those relationships. Let's make things happen. As my dad would say, let's always move forward looking for solutions to make things better in life. Hopefully, you'll vote for me, and I'll look forward to serving you.
Mr. Anderson.
Once again, thank you to the NAACP and League of Women Voters, and thank you, George. You did a good job. I'm very, very pleased with the work you did there with moderating. I just also want to thank all of you that attended in person. I know many of you, and I know where some of you stand, and I know that all of us don't always agree, but I just appreciate the civility in this room. Whether or not we agreed on everything that was said tonight, or you do, that's beside the point. I just appreciate everybody being here. We need more people like this that can come together, and even if we don't always agree, are able to sit in a room and say, yeah, we can actually be in this place. If more people were like this, we'd be in a better spot. Thank you to Jeff for being here. I really, really believe I am the best fit for this job. I've dedicated my life to this city. I could have left a long time ago, but I wanted to stay here. This is my home. It's always going to be my home, and I want to make it a better place. And I look towards the future. I don't have any kids at this point, but when I do, I want to make sure that this is a good place for them. I'm looking to the future. I'm looking to 50 years from now, what is this going to be like for them? And I want to hand them off a better place than I received it as a kid. So ask for your vote on November 8th, and make sure to go and vote. Thank you.
As we bring this forum to a close, I'd like to remind the voters that this forum was filled by the School District of Beloit and will be available on their YouTube station. And in addition to the information provided by the candidates in this forum, you can also access candidate answers on vote411.org, the League's online voter guide. This concludes tonight's candidate forum. On behalf of all eligible voters, thank you, candidates, for your participation. To all of the audience members, thank you for attending. And could we please have a round of applause for the candidates? Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you.